Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Justin the Food Entrepreneur Show. I'm Justin Bizzaro. I'm your host. That's Bizzaro. If you want to find me on Instagram or Facebook, again, two Z's, two R's for anyone out there. If you like what you hear, share, like, pass on the episode, guys. We don't charge anything. Entrepreneurs come on here for free. We don't bring on any advertisements. We don't want any restrictions on what we can share here. So, in order to do that, like, share, comment, follow these entrepreneurs, follow their products, see what they're about. I promise you, all of them are giving back in a way to the world around them. They're creating jobs, they're creating opportunities, and some of them are even doing more than that. So stay tuned. With that being said, I have Jason Wright with us from Wild out of Nashville slash Lexington, Tennessee and Kentucky, respectively. How are you doing today, Jason?
I'm great, Justin. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Okay, let's start with little Jason because to become a chicken chip king,
Yep.
okay, and trailblazer for that matter, we're gonna say that it's a very impressive what you've done with your product and the volume that you have and the fan base. I would say you've got a fan base. It's not just a customer base. Okay, I've done a lot of homework, and as we were talking about, I've known about your product for a while through CrossFit, through Zoe and John, and what they're doing, and Step Up CrossFit and the teams that they've been on with backcountry and stuff like that, the CrossFit Games. So I, um, I like your product. I enjoy your product, especially the chicken and waffles. That's just a home run for me, no matter what. Um, but let's talk about you. Let's talk about your story. Where'd you grow up? What kind of family did you grow up? Did you grow up with entrepreneurs? Let's sort of anchor all these influences along the way because I think they're important for your story.
Yeah, for sure, Justin. Well, first of all, I like how you said you like the product, but I got to tell you, man, we just launched a cracker, and you're going to love that product. And not my words, but all the people I've spoke to has said to me, Jay, I like your cracker or I like your chip. But what did you do on this cracker? Because I absolutely love the cracker. I can't even tell there's protein in it, but we'll get to that later. So I grew up in Lancaster, South Carolina. Nobody was really entrepreneur in my family, to the point where we think about an entrepreneur today. But when I really peeled the onion back and think back, I was really surrounded by entrepreneurs. Like my grandfather was a farmer. My mom worked third shift at a bleachery, and I say bleachery, it was more of a textile. That's what we called it, was a bleachery, but basically they made sheets and bedspreads. But during the day, she would go and clean people's homes. So, I guess I've always been around a bunch of hustlers, and so I think that kinda instilled that work ethic in me early. What I wasn't around though was, healthy eating. I mean, I grew up in the South. We were just eating, what normal Southern folks, that live on a farm eat. I mean, there's a lot of carbs, there's bread, there's potato, there's a lot of things out the garden. Um, and one of the things that really, kinda comes full circle for me is, I did grow up as I got older, a lot of folks in my family became diabetic, and I felt like, in my early 20s, like, that kinda stuck with me, and I went down a path of wanting to clean up my eating and just try something different, which led me to Wild. I mean, it really did. It led me to my first business, but the idea there was, a South Beach diet was popular in my 20s, and so I tried, like, a different style of eating, and, my for the first time, the way I can describe it the best, for the first time in my life, I had this, like, fog lift, right, from my head, and I really was a clear thinker at that point, and I got addicted to that feeling, and so from that point forward, everything I did was like this type of low carb or complex carb. So it was all high protein, which led me to Wild because I love potato chips, I love French fries, but, reality is they didn't love me back.
So let's talk about what do you do when you're in your 20s and you're coming up with this. Let's talk about like in your mind, you're doing what for a career at this point? Are you an entrepreneur in another sense, or you're just sort of doing the 9 to 5?
Yeah, so, I'll touch a little bit on it.
Yeah.
It is it's an interesting story. I don't know if it's the best path you could choose, but, um, in my early 20s, I fell into a modeling gig, and that led me to New York, and that was really the, backbone of me, like, trying to eat healthier,
Mm,
because at that point, for, like, 5 years, what I did for money was, I modeled, I bounced around between New York, I lived in, Europe, and I lived in, Miami, and I would do that, um I'd follow the season, and long story short, that got me into healthy eating, and my first way before Wild, my first business, I started making, a healthier granola, lower sugar, almost grain-free before grain-free was a thing, and, um, and I launched that brand 2004. Now there was another brand on the market called Bare Naked at the time, and that brand was, a lot more, they had everything buttoned up, they were a lot more sophisticated, they had a great product, great people behind them, and, they ended up being the trailblazer of that category, and, I had a brand called Feed, there was other brands out there, and really after, Bare Naked was acquired, I think 2007, no one else from a granola standpoint, just, having only a granola in the portfolio, um, ever was a big success. So we closed that business in 2010, but at that point, I'd had I'd transitioned from modeling and entrepreneurship, the bug I was bitten, and now I'm just looking for what's next in the food industry.
yeah, this is interesting. Wow. I agree with this in many ways. I keep trying. I've tried to leave a few times. I've gone into hospitality quite a bit, I branched into entertainment now, involved in studios and producing TV and movies and stuff like that. But still, I go back to the food. No matter what I do, it's who I am. It's how I connect to people. It's what I relate to in the world. It's certainly how I understand the world in a weird kind of way, especially the way the food moves in my relationship. So I agree with this. One of the things I think that's interesting also about entrepreneurship is once you understand it and once you get a feel of it, even if you have a failure or you lose or whatever, some unsuccesses, it doesn't go away. The urge to keep going, and it's important because most of the lessons are learned and you don't repeat them. And that's probably where we are from granola to chip, and learning it in the category and the shelf space on a grocery store. Okay. One of the things I always tell people is look how much your product line is going to take up in a grocery store. What product line is it going to fit into, even if it's a new product? And then how much space does the grocery store allow for it? Well, we all see the chip aisle. So you know where I'm going with this conversation versus the granola aisle.
Yep.
But that's one of the things, it's real estate's important, how many eyes are on it, how many more customers are going up and down the chip aisle to see your brand versus the granola aisle. Just saying it's still marketing and advertising, even if it's not selling on the shelf. People recognize brands if they see it repeatedly. So repetitively. And so let's talk about the idea. Where does this come from? Because you're granola. This is health. This is what I want to do. But now you're like, okay, I want to go in a different direction. Do you have an idea? It's chips and maybe French fries. By the
No,
way,
so
it's my first word as a kid. It wasn't mom or dad, just so we're aware on.
that's a good first word.
Yeah.
No, so,
So but carbs don't treat me well either. So
um, I uh, the blessing I had for feed was I really created a Me Too product. And I didn't know what that term meant, but at the end, I was well aware of that term. And for Wild, I wanted to do something that no one had ever done. That was my mission. And I was looking at all my favorite snacks and trying to figure out, how do I, make it better? And at the bottom of a potato chip bag one night, I had the idea to replace the potato with chicken breast. And then I went down the rabbit hole and started coming up with like how I thought we could do it in my own kitchen, using, things that you will find in your kitchen, from the food, chicken breast, broth, flour, spice, to a food processor somewhere that I can make an emulsion, to a sous vide, a way to kind of like cook the product and to get it into a form that I could slice a nice thin chip. And so that was the idea that in those days. Luckily, at that time, I was living in Boulder, Colorado, and I had connected with some meat science professors at Colorado State University, and they were working with me, and also they had a lab. I could go in a full blown kitchen with some, more commercial equipment that I could use and test on, and so that was, the idea came from wanting to replace the chicken, wanting to replace the potato with chicken breast, and then just, I'm the type of guy that once I get something on my mind and I wanna do it, like, no matter how crazy it may sound, like, I just get obsessed, and that's all I think about, and I was determined to try to figure this out, and it's a long road, a lot of turns and twists. We never really set out to have a manufacturing facility. Today, I have 3. That was never on my radar, but it was just something that eventually we were gonna have to do, or the brand was not gonna move forward.
Let's talk about launch. Let's talk about building into a bag. Let's talk about the commercialization from residential to getting it to that step, because that's the hardest step, I think, initially, and after that, you can get the product to work. Now you just have to put in the effort. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just saying it's one of the hardest steps is getting it from, "Okay, I believe in this product now. It can be sold to the public. It's healthy. It's not gonna go bad on the shelf," so on and so forth, and you're dealing with something that's now, animal-based versus plant-based, right?
Yep.
So let's walk our way through that a little bit, because I think it's important in anchoring your brand, because when you take on something like this and you, what I would say, shift perspective of the consumer to see the potential here, you're having to cross over some scientific boundaries and things like that that not a normal chip maker such as Lay's is not having to deal with, for example.
Yeah, for sure, in the early days, the idea was that I would, so there's 2 parts of Wild, right? There's, what I call we make the wild potato, and then there's a part where you crisp, season, and bag, and I thought in the early days that we would do that at a pork rind facility, and we actually raised capital with that in mind. Reality is we could not make it at a pork rind facility, and I had to figure out with a manufacturer of equipment manufacturer, how to go make this product, at least how to take the wild potato and crisp it, season it. And so I had to work with a machine shop and come up with what I thought would be a way to do this in a small scale and then take it to this equipment manufacturer to make a larger commercial size. Um, and in those days, we installed that piece of equipment into another co-man down in Virginia, and man, it was really hard. We one was teaching them our secret sauce. So as we were learning, they were learning, And then number 2, the economics of how we were doing it and how much we were handling it and making the wild potato in Chicago and sending it to Virginia, like, the margin was very weak. Um, and that was probably, like, giving us credit when I say weak. Um, but anyway, we did use that in 2017, 2018, that kinda, um route the market to launch into Whole Foods and launch into, Sprouts, and in the early days, like, it was hard to explain to the consumer what the product was. Um, we did a lot of demos, and I personally did a lot of demos because I needed to hear how the customer was digesting and absorbing what I was trying to tell them the product was. And so what we learned was, we were calling it chicken chips. That was not the right way to call it. Um, when you look at chicken chips, and if you follow that to the pet industry, they exist.
Yeah.
So a lot of people have pets. I think what said 19 or $20 billion category in the US. I mean, people love pets and most people shop pet industry. And so technically I was giving them something that was familiar with them, but in the pet world. And I didn't know that at the time. But we did a lot of demos and we, went back to the drawing board and, we started we modified in 2019. We came out with a new, design, and that design talked about chicken breast, egg white, bone broth, talked about protein chips, and so that is when we really started to turn the corner and people really understood the product. And the good thing about the early days was in the demo, they get a chance to try it, and when they tried it, they were like, "I really like this," and I could explain to them, 1, the product, and 2, what it was made of. And that's what stuck with me is like, we need to go to a design that really talks about what's in the product and change from chicken chip to protein chip. And so that was like a, early stage 2017, 18, come out with that pack in 2020, which will be around about the same time that we decide to go build our own manufacturing facility.
That facility, let's talk about that because you've done the research now, you've built the equipment, you're having to find a location. Let's do and we never quite I never quite figured out how you bounced around and ended up in Lexington or Nashville, but maybe that's part of this.
Yeah.
But let's tie all that together, for the audience.
Yeah, in 2020 early, we were at a board meeting and we kinda got as far as we were gonna get with this kinda co-man operation where you're gonna do the wild potato in Chicago, go to Virginia, and we were at a point where, the equipment we were working with was super small, but we were kinda like we had almost sold capacity out, so we had to make a move. And
And
we
you've developed the bag at this point
developed
and marketing and boxing and shipping and all
Yeah,
that stuff.
we've developed the bag and the marketing. I mean, marketing, I'll say light because Wilds never really had a big marketing program just because we everything was tied up in having to how do you make it? And all the money was going to equipment or moving or installing or uninstalling. And so in those days I was doing all the sales, plus trying to operate, equipment. It was a long road, but in landing in Lexington, Kentucky, we we were at this stage where we were gonna go and finance another piece of equipment, and we knew, this is a one of one, and so we could not put it on the East Coast, we could not put it on the West Coast. We needed it centrally located so we could get to, like, most states within 1 to 2 day driving in truck. So, we started looking in Ohio, Illinois, Indiana, and Kentucky, and we landed in Lexington. My business partner, Philippe, met a father-son duo who was building buildings in Lexington. They were building a lot of buildings for the bourbon industry, and they had some buildings during COVID that they had built in Clark County, which is Winchester, Kentucky, 20 miles from Lexington, that no one had, that was not under lease. And we met with them, we looked at a few of the buildings, one stood out, and those guys, like, immediately felt like family. I remember on Friday, we met with them, and listen, on Tuesday, we had a deal done, a handshake, and on Wednesday, we were signing leases and agreements, and at the time, to be honest, I didn't have a pot to piss in, and, I told Philippe, I was like, "Listen, if they check the bank account, we'll never get this lease done." And fast forward, they're like family to us now, and they tell us the same story. Like, we know you didn't have any money, but it was during COVID, so we had no other option either. And we might as well, take a shot. And so I remember them telling a story that they took our deposit check to the bank and just asked the teller, "Hey, can you just tell me if this would even cash if we deposited it?" And she was like, "Yeah, they could cover it." And, we were off to the races. But we wound up in Kentucky, started out, we needed somewhere centrally located. And then it became, we looked at other buildings, in Ohio, we looked in Illinois. But when we met the Tierneys, Ron and Patrick, it was like family, and we just got it done so fast, and we never looked back.
Yeah, this is awesome. I like this a lot because these relationships matter and we sort of snowball our lives and those relationships hopefully last with us. The Let's go from there. So how many square foot are you talking about here where you bite off your first one? Because it's quite like, you're customizing a piece of equipment. You're now talking about manufacturing. You're talking about scaling at this point quite a bit, I have to imagine.
Yeah, so the building was 50,000 square foot, and we were like, in over our heads. We were like, "We'll never use the space, too big, make half of it a warehouse." And we literally outgrew that, so we opened the building in January of 21, and by the end of the year, in 21, we have outgrown this building, so now we go and they build a building beside, the manufacturing facility, which is 75,000 square foot fulfillment center, and we move into that, in 22, and shortly after that, by end of 22, we're, like, starting to outgrow that, where now we're gonna have to move product to Chicago to a 3PL. We installed a second line in the 50,000 square foot facility in 23, and then we that was tapped out. Like, we now had some capacity, but the next step would be a whole new building. And in 25, we decided, well, really at the end of 24, we signed a lease on a building up the street that was not just the land, and the Tierneys built the building, and we got into that building in early 20, well, mid 25, and we started installing equipment by the end of last year. And currently today, we are just now turning on. I mean, as of May 9th, we ran the first production of the cracker out of there. And currently today, we are still in the process of turning on the chip line. That chip line that we installed up there is a much more sophisticated line than we've ever ran. And there is a large learning curve going on right now, Justin, and I'm in the middle of it.
Are you keep do you have you kept the other facilities open? I assume you're gonna run them in parallel.
Yeah, so great question. The current facility, if you think about the current facility, not only do we do the ready to eat, but we also do the raw side. So we're bringing fresh chicken breast in, we're making the wild potato. So that facility is going to go just to raw. So we're going to expand raw, and so now you'll separate. Raw chicken will be at one facility, and then you'll ship that wild potato up the street to the ready to eat facility. So you'll separate, incoming raw materials. And I'm excited about that because I think it's just one control point that we needed.
Yeah, I wanna anchor this for the audience too and anyone in general. I have to imagine you're dealing with the USDA instead of the FDA because you're not in chips are FDA, just so the audience knows, or FDA deals with sea animals also, um, just so or and bites, wild game.
You're 100%.
So you're having USDA inspect your facilities and everything else, so you've had to jump that loophole, which is a whole other loophole. comparatively to starting something. So there's a lot of regulation and in
Yeah.
both places, regardless, and it's from a federal level, honestly. So, and you're crossing state lines, so on and so forth. So let's talk about taking on all of that because as you're designing your systems, your new recipes, changing your lines, changing your standard operating procedures, you're having to change your food safety plans around every
Yep.
facility you do. So you're managing all this. I mean, talk to me about your team. Talk to me about building it over the years. Talk to me about what those individuals look like because there's a lot of big pieces here that I want everyone to understand. As you scale, you have to have big humans, I'm gonna call them big humans, to take on those big roles. You yourself, as the entrepreneur, may have to go in and develop accounting, cost analysts. I had to go develop procurement. I had to go develop construction. I had to go develop the food equipment side. You have to go build it, but ultimately you need big humans to come in and take those roles, food safety in particular, and food security. So let's talk about building your team as you're building this.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, first, you nailed it. The USDA federal regulation is a whole nother level. Anyone running an FDA facility is, it's a walk in the park versus what we deal with. We have a guy on site every day, right? We have an office I built for him.
That you have to pay to the government.
He
Yep,
took and he is there, and
yep,
he is, checking times and temps and ingredients and labels, and he can write you up, he can shut you down, he can stop production. That is not something you deal with at FDA, you just, I'll tell you a great story. FDA, so the granola fell under FDA, right? We created the package, we printed the package, and we shipped it. And so when I got into this world, that was my plan. And then I realized, and I was put on hold, you got to send your label to the government. And so a lot of times when people look at Wild, I've had this happen so many times with marketers. They'll come in and they'll be like, "Oh, well, there's just a lot of clutter on your package," and I'm like, you know, right out of the gate, it's deer in the headlight. And I'm like, "Guys, time out. Do you know what you're dealing with? It's the USDA. You think I wanna say on the bottom, crispy chips crafted from chicken breast, egg white, bone broth? Like, that is a statement of identity, mandatory, federal, legal, I have to say that. I
yep,
you know, and then, words like, when we say, like, crafted from real ingredient, if you go back and look at, like, some of the bars out there, they would just say, like, the brand, and then they would have, like, 2 almonds, 3 egg whites, 4 dates. You would never get away from that with, USDA. So I'd have to say things like real ingredients, including that's a word, that's a federal word they make you use, chicken breast, egg white, bone broth. So, um, fast forward and talk about the team and how that fits in. Um, we hired right out of the gate, when we went from co-man to doing our own facility, we hired someone from the Chicago manufacturing facility we were working with. Now that facility, Land of Frost, is a investor in Wild. And so I'm close to the owners and I was like, hey, we're gonna do this for the first time. Like, I need some major help. And so I hired Boyd Lee, who had 30 years experience in meat, and he's my um, technical director, and so he handles all things USDA, all things labeling. He works every day with USDA on site to review any paperwork they have. And then Philippe, my partner, he goes back to owning his own. It was called Little Kentucky Smokehouse, where he was producing hams for Kroger, and so he goes back 30 years in the meat and cheese industry, and so that's a big plus, right? Huge value that I got these 2 guys with major experience. And then, we've got a lot of, so one positive, huge benefit to Wild is 20 minutes up the street, Nestle operates a facility where they make all Hot Pocket under USDA. And so we actually, because we're more family oriented, we're more, our schedules are different. We don't run a point system. And point system mean, if you're late, you get docked points, and the next thing you know, you're out of a job. So we're more family oriented. And so we are able to hire a lot of those employees
Bingo.
come with USDA training and manufacturing skills. And so that's been a huge benefit to us. Today we came into Winchester. I think we created 25 jobs day one, and today I employ 180 people. So and that's something I'm really proud of.
Creating jobs, putting tax dollars into the system. These are things that we are supposed to do as entrepreneurs. We have a calling, guys. We have a purpose, but our purpose is to pollinate the world in ways that we can't even imagine. We create sub jobs. I mean, let's talk about the chicken farmer. Let's talk about the person moving the chicken. Let's talking about the no one wants to talk about it, but we'll call it the kill plant that kills the chicken. I'll just be blunt because we don't it is what it is. This is what we do. This is how we do it. This is why, because we need it as humans. This is part of who we are. This is part of our sustainability in a growing population that's going to continue getting older, guys. So just so I anchor that as everyone sends me the messages, this is why, because we need to continue to grow our sources of food. We need to continue to explore it. We need to continue to find new ways to eat, and we need to be aware that one day we're probably gonna have to leave this planet because we'll outgrow it, and we're gonna have to take things like this with us, high in protein. They have
Yep.
snacks. How do we figure out how to move it light in weight? It's no different than Fritos being supplied to the military during World War II to help sustain calorie intake. We weren't as aware of importance of protein then.
Yep.
So this is an upgrade in that system. It's no different than the military sustaining it. It's why MREs exist and things like that. How do we get more bang for a buck, and how do we eat more efficiently and effectively? Okay, I'm just going to anchor that for everyone. And then I'm going to go back to the USDA thing for everyone. Here's the type of idiosyncrasies that we're talking about in the difference of an FDA, because generally the plants, if you wash them, and you cook them, they're pretty safe, okay? You can get pretty much rid of any foodborne illness. It's just not that way in animals, okay? Even though it's still that way in wild animals, and the FDA oversees fish and sea and bison and things like that, elk, the reality is still you'd rather, even if you're in bison or the elk industry and that's your farm, or ostrich or whatever in wild animals, you wanna bring in the USDA to do it and get their opinion, even if it's only FDA, and here's why. The amount of attention that's spent on it, it is a good deal. Everyone's like, "Oh, they cost me so much money." If you had to hire that employee from an outsider, a good USDA inspector, they would cost you a lot more, okay? And that person, if you use them and you build a relationship with them properly, will help your business. The other, um, let me ask you a question here. Let's talk about the team in terms of spreading them out amongst locations, because now you're having to move them into Nashville and you're having to move them into Lexington as well. So I'm going to get into that, but I want to finish the USDA thing. Things like you cannot say if it were Mexican corn, you can say that in the FDA, for example, possibly. Okay, no one's gonna stop you. But if you're in the USDA, you could not say that if it had meat in it. It would have to be Mexican style corn. Why? Because you're not in Mexico, you're not producing it in Mexico, and you're not following the exact criteria that makes it Mexican in cuisine. Okay. That's the particulars that they care about. Southern style, if you're doing to the public. You can do it in your restaurant any way you want. There's no USDA in it. But when you're producing for the public and it's being shipped or a package, these are the things that we're talking about. That's the amount of detail that the USDA cares about. Why does it matter? It's like the Jack Reacher TV show on Amazon. Details matter for the safety of human beings, for the goodness of the food. You want your food to be quality and everyone to love it and it to taste the same every single time. That's why this is important. These
Yep.
little things are important. What do I mean? The better you do at this, the more freedom you have to create, because your standard operating procedures as a business are locked in. Okay, I'm just going to anchor that. Now, I want to go into moving your team around now, because you started in one location, then you built two buildings, and while they're right next to each other, you're starting to spread your team thin quickly. You're scaling quickly. you're having to add employees quickly, you're having to train quickly in a short period of time. So what does that look like for you for a training program as employees come in? Because normally you have a longevity, and I've experienced this because of businesses that have grown, or you take over a whole hospital contract suddenly. Next thing you know, you're training 300 employees like that in one day or in a 3-week period. But let's talk about this because I rarely get to talk about this on the show with someone that's experienced this. But you're having to take a lot of people, you're having to steal a lot of people potentially from other places so they come with the experience you need. And I use the word steal because this is business, guys, and it's not personal. We take people, their lives get better, our lives get better. Someone else gets a job in that business you just stole the person from. So it's not a bad thing. People
Uh,
get more jobs. And so let's talk about this, building this out,
yeah.
number of employees you need.
Yeah, in the early days, and I'll go to where we're at today because there's a really challenge that we have right now that we'll get through. But in the early days, like you hire a subcontractor or a temp agency, and they start sending you people, and then um, you bring on the employees that are working hard, you bring them on full time after a certain period of time, 90 to 120 days. We you talk about stealing. So we had this one guy that was coming to the plant and he worked for a temp agency, but I really liked his attitude and he was a guy that was bringing in all the recruits. And so I took him to dinner, made him an offer, and now he comes to Wild and now he's working with all the temp agencies and he's recruiting. That was a huge lift because he knew who was working at Nestle. He knew who was working all around town, who was good at this, who was good at that, and he just went to work and he started bringing in a bunch of really high quality qualified individuals, and so that um, was a huge benefit. We grew from 25 employees to 50 employees. I think by 2000 and early 25 we were already up to 120 employees. And then fast forward today, he's still here doing the same thing, recruiting, and we're up to like 180. And you talk about moving people around, and I'll just talk here first. We trying to get this facility up and running up the street. It's a mile away. That's the new building. The building behind me is the original. We split, the team trying to get a skeleton staff up the hill to get it going. And then we have a skeleton staff down, behind me to run current chip. We ran Cracker up the street. And the big challenge is that the equipment up at the new building is so much more sophisticated. We really need the whole team that wants to go up. And so for the last 2 months, Justin, it's been a real struggle to run 2 operations, um, and to have it, with limited staff because 'cause we're really spread thin. Looking back, maybe we should have hired, 10% more, but you're always trying to watch cost and, you already know that you're gonna start a new facility and there's gonna be plenty of downtime. There's gonna be, just, waste. That's normal when you start something new. Have I've never seen somebody turn on the equipment and we just start bagging great product and boom, it's in market. It's a lot of turns and twists. So we tried to kind of, watch that. And I think, looking back, I probably should have bit the bullet and put 10% more staff around it. But, we're kind of halfway through now. We're in the middle of closing 180 to move everybody up there this week, today and tomorrow and Saturday. Um, but that's been, like I talk about Boyd. Boyd lives in Indiana. He's the guy that does all the technical director, USDA. He comes here, he travels every Monday or Sunday and it leaves Thursday night. So he's in a hotel. Then I have Iman, my food scientist, who's a brilliant young guy, travels every early Monday morning from Chicago, is in a hotel the Thursday or Friday morning. Um, and then Phil and I live here. I haven't been back to Nashville since March, right after Expo was the last time I was in Nashville. So at some point, I need to go back to Nashville to go home there. Um, the other folks, really, well, I got Ben. He travels from Indiana. He's a plant controller. So we do have a lot of people that travel in every week. And then majority of the folks do live here locally. Um, and then if you think about Nashville, when I left Boulder, we had a small team, not a big team. And not everyone actually, I don't no one moved. So either we worked with people in Boulder to either say you can work remote, or there was jobs where we said, you'll have to find something new. We'll have to part ways. And when we got to Nashville, my goal there was to build a team. And reality is, it was post COVID, and you couldn't get anyone to relocate. Everybody wanted to work from home. So here I had this beautiful building, this beautiful, I say building, at an office, but a really nice office. And it was me and Charlotte, my German short hair pointer, and my wife and Annie, our dachshund, would be in the office of 2,000 square foot. So, fast forward, we gave that office up a year ago. This August will be a year ago. It's funny though, if you think about what do I have now? Team members in Nashville. Well, we have a chief commercial officer in Nashville. We have senior VP of sales in Nashville. We have director of demand planning in Nashville. We have an accountant in Nashville. So if you look at it, I got 5 employees, not counting me and my wife, in Nashville, but yet I couldn't get them to come to an office. So, um, a lot of times when they travel, they all wanna travel to Lexington. They wanna come see where the magic is. It's at the plant. We do have plenty of office space here. Uh, for example, next week, we'll have 26 or 27 AOP planning, and you'll have 8 people fly in. We'll do the tour of the facility, and then we'll lock ourselves in a room for planning for 2 days. My CFO, I didn't mention that, but he lives in San Diego, but he's here every other week at the plant. And so I guess if we hadn't have been in manufacturing and we were a co-man, then maybe everybody would have went to Nashville for all these meetings. But reality is, when you do the magic and everybody wants to see the magic, they all just want to come to the plant. So
No one ever wants to come to headquarters when you're in the manufacturing business. Honestly, it's a dry place. There's not any magic going on there. It's people punching numbers,
yeah.
collecting money, really. Um,
Listen, I got to tell you this funny story real quick. You brought up a good one. Back when we were in Boulder and we had the office there, but I had already started manufacturing in Lexington, and I was going back and forth. I remember I would like come from this energy of manufacturing, right? Where we're like, make it happen, get it done. And then I would go to the office and these people would be showing up at like 9:30 with their pour over coffee. And I would get so mad, like, I'm like, "You have no idea what's going on." Like, these guys are starting at 5 a.m. They're, like, making it happen, and here we are just, like, you guys are showing up at 9:30, and then, and sometimes I'd walk in and be so quiet and be like, "It feels like a morgue." Like, "You get up, do something, move around, like, holler, scream," like, and I've always just been that energy. And,
Colorado's kind of that way. I
it
know.
is it
Yeah.
is.
Yes. There's not a lot of, I wouldn't call it negative energy, but there's not a lot of positive energy either. It's just kind of existence. And I lived there a long time, but it's one of the things that being from the East Coast and being hugely energy driven and being able to spike my adrenaline by, triggers and exercise. And I'm pretty intense. If people are really, I can be intense because I demand excellence. I'm that person. I want excellence. I came from the food business. We were producing millions of meals a day in the hospitals. The meal needed to be the same in every hospital in that system. You need excellence. It needs to taste the same every single time.
Yep.
And don't mess with the salt, bro. And so and so, but it's, but it's but it's what we're talking about here. You have a lot of moving pieces. You're building a business, you're learning it, so you're also trying to build a hierarchy. You're trying to figure out what do I actually need from a hierarchical standpoint? Managers, supervisors, vice presidents, executives. like, so talk to me about this because you're growing quickly. Like, in your mind, how do you place the hierarchy to support you? We talked about the team and the important pieces, but now you've got to put them in the right places so they succeed. I don't want to use a weird analogy, but it'd be like putting a fullback in the position of a striker. I'm a soccer guy, but that doesn't always go so well. Sometimes it does every once in a while, but
Yeah,
like,
lucky guy. As we got the facility up and going in 21, I quickly realized that I had to go focus on hiring sales because I needed someone out there, a team that was pushing sales, and that was not me. I was not going to be there. You just can't do it all. And so that was our first move is we built a sales team. Shortly after that, like, you talk about raising money and capital leases and how much we have, in equipment. Like I had to bring in a seasoned CFO. And I'll tell you, both on the sales and the CFO, it was like through contacts, through connections, through talking to people. I'll tell you a funny story. Like my CFO, I was talking to a financial advisor at the time, investment banker, and we were going to go through a capital raise. And he was like, "Jay, where you guys are with the modeling, like it's not going to be good enough. Like you're going to have to do something different." And asked if he had any thoughts, and he said, "Well, there's one guy out of California that has been doing some, consulting roles. We should put you guys in contact." And so we exchanged emails. He put his number in the email, and I was like, "Yeah, I'll call you at this time." And so I put his number, right, and I just dialed his number in my phone, right, just as I'm, like, dialing a number, but when I hit send, the damn thing came up, it was programmed, and I looked, and it was Tristan Galaxy Granola, and so he had owned a granola company when I owned Feed, and we were competitors. And it was like, holy shit, this guy's been in my phone the whole time. And so, like I have a few stories like that. Now, when I got to, so Tristan comes in, he gets it buttoned up as a consultant. Then he says, I like what you're doing, and I like the team, and so he becomes full time. And then, same thing with the sales. Sam comes in, he likes what we're doing, he becomes full time, and then he starts building out his team. The last thing we did, Justin, was marketing. Again, so much of the cash is going in. Can you make the product? And then
yeah, of course.
to
The
market,
volumes I need.
yeah, and then I don't want to market something that is not, in my opinion, ready for prime time. And I feel like, even today, I would tell you, I feel like our chip needs 15 to 20% more improvement. I think our cracker is ready for prime time, and I see we launched, in May, and it is, I've never in my life been a part or seen a product take off as fast as this. Like we've already got Costco saying we're going to keep it as an everyday item. Like that don't happen 2, 3 weeks into a launch.
Mhm.
And so now we're scrambling. We had developed that line to do a pretzel and a pita. There's no way we're going to do anything but this cracker on that line now because I won't have the capacity. So we are now focused on. We hired Carmen Fidel about a year ago. She's our VP of marketing. She's starting to build out her team. Justin there that runs ecom and Amazon. And so now we're starting to put all the pieces in place and to really start to smash the gas on the marketing piece. But all those guys are remote, not Carmen's in Boulder, Justin's in North Carolina. All these guys are remote. Everybody at the manufacturing facility is in place in Lexington, but everybody else is all scattered around the country.
Yeah, my business was the same, just so you know. I mean, we had a headquarters where, we did the accounting and the marketing and stuff like that and the finance, the main business, but most of the time, Florida, Virginia, Colorado, we were scattered all over the country. I don't know of any other way to do it or recruit the best in the food business. I don't know how to do it because it's just you not concentrated and the people don't wanna move anymore, and it's pretty easy to fly.
Yes, it yeah.
It's kinda crazy, actually. I think I just saw you can pay 126 bucks or 160 bucks maybe for not like it's a great airline, Frontier, but then after that, it's $26 for a flight, you certain flights, but you can get any flights to anywhere as many times as you want in a month. So you could literally travel as much you want for 26 bucks per flight. That's kinda cool. So let's talk about this, as my last question. Let's talk about flavor development. Let's start with the chips first. Let's get into the crackers.
Mm.
Uh, but there's you have flavor profiles, you have to develop and you have an idea, and now you gotta get the flavors to work with the idea, okay? Because not every flavor works and the customer doesn't love every flavor, let's be honest. I love creating flavors and different options for everyone, but most of the time it's just, that I'm the only audience in that case. So let's talk about, this a little bit, Jason, as we start to wrap up here.
Yeah, so flavor for the chip, we early on, started to marry flavor, chicken dishes, right? So, when you think about our number 1 product is buffalo chicken. I mean, that's our number 1 SKU and, by a long shot, and so when we early on started to focus on chicken dishes, you know, call it chicken and waffle, call it Korean sweet and spicy chicken, barbecue chicken, um, you know, spicy queso, you go to Chipotle today, you do a chicken bowl, you put in your toppings on and boom, there's queso. Um, and so, that started to get people to really understand, the whole, complete package of Wild and the chip. And so that was what we stuck with. Um, I used to do all the development of the flavors. I'm still heavily involved, but we brought, Sierra Williams on from, Pepsi 3 years ago, 2 years ago. She's a flavor scientist, and she really opened up my, lens to all the other capabilities, seasoning houses, who's good at what, like this person might be good at dairy, and this person's good at barbecue, and this person's good at, like, around the world flavors, and, um, and so now we're, like, off to the races. When we developed our cracker flavors, be truthful, we wanted to go right after the cracker that we all grew up on, so classic cheddar was like, I had to have it, I had to have that nostalgia, classic cheddar cracker taste, and, so we developed that. And then, we wanted to do buffalo cheddar because our product in chip is number 1 flavor buffalo. So we did a buffalo cheddar, which turned out to be, like, really, really good. And then we got a few tips, from a few retailers, that cracker emerging brands, Hot Honey and Ranch, were, like, really strong. We launched the Hot Honey, we saved Ranch for a special retailer launch in October. Um, and then we did a smoked Gouda because, we were looking for something elevated, and to be honest, Costco loves smoked Gouda, and it's really selling well, and, yeah, I mean, that's kinda how we landed there. I mean, we did a lot of work sessions. I didn't really do a lot of research to say, "Hey," I mean, my research was mainly, like, looking at the category. And then some of it was just gut, like, we should go in this direction. When there's never been a protein cracker like Wild, and then there's really never been any other, competitor to Cheez It. If you think about it, even if you look at Annie's or you look at Back to Nature, like they all have, the classic cheddar, but their product doesn't eat close to the legacy, and we could I don't wanna go into why. I think I have a couple of thoughts on it, but I would tell you if we didn't do our own manufacturing, I think we would have never lived up to it. But doing your own manufacturing, as you know, Justin, you can do something that, requires a lot of time. And it doesn't really cost you a whole lot, right? Because you set up the facility for it, you got the space for it, you plan for it. But walking into a co-man, telling them that you want to you know, let this product set for a certain amount of days before you go and make a dough out of it or make a cracker out of it, like they just don't probably have that space. And So, you're limited to what you can do when you don't do it yourself. And that was one of the big uh, positives that I think made Wild Crackers so good versus competition.
Manufacturing on your own is the solution, for anyone. Ultimately, you have to get there. I don't, um, within reason, but if you don't control the product and you don't control the brand, you're not able to grow and diversify your flavor profiles you much as you need to. And when it comes to consumer packaged goods, you're gonna need eventually a plethora of flavors. You're gonna need specialties because brands, certain grocery stores, whatever, want exclusives. They want holiday specials. "Hey, I have an opportunity. You want an end cap in the grocery store to everyone to see, but I need X, Y, and Z product." "Well, I haven't produced it yet, but I have the bags done. I have the recipes done. I just need to buy the ingredients, and yes, I can have it done." These are important in this world because once you're in, these opportunities come. It's too many times I see CPG companies only look at what's in front of them, but not see that you need to build an arsenal because opportunities only are turned into profit for those who are prepared. Just so
Yep.
everyone's aware, and preparation is part of what we're talking about here. Jason, where can they find you online? Where can they get your products? How can the audience find out more about what you guys do?
Yeah, so Sprouts and Whole Foods, big supporters and partners since day one. Costco, the chips are in Costco and in every Costco in the country right now. Texas has the cracker. You can find the cracker also at Target in sports nutrition. And you can find the cracker over in Sam's. And we're starting to roll out to Sprouts, and we're starting to roll out to Whole Foods. And there'll be many more retailers coming. Um, Harris Teeter, about down in the Carolinas. But the chip itself is in about 20,000 locations. And the the Amazon, Instacart, you could find all of our products there as well.
Awesome. And last thing as we go here, out of all this whole time you've been doing this, you're learning as you go. Let's talk about mentor, support system. Where have you been able to find that? How? Because it's not easy. You've been on a 20-year journey, 25-year, 26-year journey at this point. You
Yeah.
start from the granola. So let's talk about that, your support system, your mentors, your guides, because obviously it's not an easy to carry the load that you're carrying for sure.
Yeah, the first and foremost, I gotta, look no further than Philippe Barnoud, the French guy that is my business partner, but a ton of experience, probably, my number one fan. He's supported and been a mentor, but also working in the trenches. Alan Karp, huge supporter of me and the business, and a visionary, someone that believed in the cracker, day one, no questions asked. And then you got Ryan Lewinman, who has been a good friend of mine for a long time in our industry, raises money to brands, marries money to brands, and just has a wealth of knowledge. Jerome Mativier, French guy. I like the French for some reason, but another French guy, and
Sure.
CFO of Pharmavite, and which is a big, vitamin, Nature's Way vitamin, and he sits on our board. And Bill Moses, another guy who was a serial entrepreneur, did Kavita, um, and um, and then Tyler Ricks, who's an operator in our industry, has been with a number of brands. Scaling them as a CEO and president, and to exit. And, he's an investor, but sits on the board. So I'm very lucky to be surrounded by a lot of great individuals. Um, yeah, very blessed. And we just got to keep chopping wood, Justin. And hopefully one day I'll advise other people, who knows?
Keep sharpening the axe, keep chopping that wood, man. Uh-huh. All right, thank you. I appreciate you big time, Jason, and your time. And again, I'd love to have you back on the show. I know we were trying to get everything scheduled, but I am gonna come down and visit you. I'll reach out to your team there. I'd love to actually do an episode at your facility, and do stuff with your chips and stuff, and we can talk about that. But I think, as I'm relaunching the show, this is a good time to talk about it with the audience. And I'm starting to go back into video again, as we've relaunched, and my life has gone in that direction again. We will be doing things like this and visiting locations and doing it. And it is part of a bigger push that we're going to call Foodtopia, just so everyone knows we're really diving into some of these entrepreneurs, the farmers that supply these guys with their product, the middle entrepreneurs in between, and then the entrepreneurs that are making it happen. Because in food, there is an ecosystem.
Mhm.
And in food, there is the supporting of each other and the building of jobs, and it's less competitive as everyone thinks. We learn from each other, but a lot of times we're also building industry. And one of the things I want everyone to know, while Jason's in chips, he's also building a whole new snack industry by himself. There's not anyone else that's come into this particular industry that he's created yet. So just so everyone's aware of that, it's something to think about. I love you guys. Again, like, share, comment on it. That's how you pay your dues. That's how you pay your money. That's how you pay for the education you're getting from this show. Give back to these guys on the show. Comment on the episodes. That matters a lot as well. Thank you guys. I love you guys, and we're out.